There's this show now. I think it's going on for over a year or so. It's called The Rising. It's
Oh,
it, it
it's
belongs to the
old.
Hill. Older than
It's
a year, 2 years?
Yeah, it's quite older actually.
No, no, no.
It's came online like this, and then suddenly it exploded about a year ago,
Okay, all right. So this,
especially after Andrew Yang interview.
yeah. So in a way, it's kind of a recent show, and it has two hosts. One of them is this lady who used to work for MSNBC, and she's great. Her name is Crystal, and she's kind of the progressive voice. And then the other person, Saagar, who I'm going to talk about right now, he's supposed to be like conservative background. However, I think the show is mainly tailored towards progressives. I mean, I would doubt if the majority of the audience aren't some kind of left-leaning audience.
Uh, I don't know, but it is. I think the best way to describe the show, I believe that's from what I remember. They did an interview with Joe Rogan
Mm-hmm.
and Crystal Ball. She put it this way: that usually what you see on mainstream TV is that they are on social issues. They are progressive and liberal. This is a very American, by the way, centric like that's the jargon we're using. So they are in social issues, they are progressive and liberal in the mainstream media, but economically they are free. They are neoliberal, or foreign policy. They are pro-war, blah blah blah.
Yeah.
In this case, in the case of the Hill, they don't agree on social issues. So I believe, say, when he says he's a conservative, he means it in a social sense. And in economic issues, they tend to agree. Like they tend to agree with government intervention, government regulation, a
Okay.
small business
So
funding.
beautiful. So I think what you're saying was actually my question. So okay, this is beautiful. So this is what the show is about. So now Sagar, one of the hosts, he recently tweeted this. So I'm going to read the tweet out. He said, "Today a riser, someone who watches this show, The Rising. Today a riser posted a story of himself smoking weed and watching Rising. It greatly distressed me. So to counteract it, I'm asking that other writers post Insta stories doing literally anything else while watching the show. I will repost them all." So, I mean, he is as anti-weed in a way that you can believe. And then I'm gonna read one of the responses, and that's pretty much my question too. So there are two tweets by this gentleman called Dean Parkinson. He wrote, "Absolutely love the show and all that, but why are you greatly distressed? I know you're conservative, but weed at home." So question mark. So it's kind of like, I think here is just kind of say, for conservative, you mind a lot what the person's doing at home, but let's forget about that. And then the next one, and this is my question, then he wrote, "Don't want to seem as if I'm bashing you, was really trying to learn why so upset by his private practice. I tried to embed myself and equate it to something else. I couldn't quite get it. You're totally entitled to your opinion without judgment. I'm just asking." And I also just asking, and I was looking around, I couldn't find anything. Why would you think he would be so anti-pot? Of course, we don't know anything personally about him, so we can't draw on like some kind of personal incident. But based on you've been watching this show for quite a bit, based on his political ideology and the things that you were talking about right now, why do you think he would be so vehemently against weed?
To be honest, it has come up in a couple of videos I've seen with Crystal Ball, but they never really, it was never about, they never had a full on argument about this that I watched. But I mean, he was pro involvement of the military in the riots, in the recent riot in the US as well. So I think in general, he tend to has a socially conservative view. I don't know, but I assume he thinks maybe pot or weed is a gateway, a slippery slope to more more I don't know, more dangerous drugs. Although I would say that in my view, it's harder to find any drug that is more dangerous than alcohol. But in both physically and socially. But I would assume that would be his argument, that it would maybe it also contributes to a moral decay of the
Yeah,
people
I
that
think that,
not
yeah.
work as hard. Like their ethics goes away.
So
I'm
sum
not
up this ideology again. So what is this? So like, what is this? You're right. So like, for instance, he might not be,
I mean,
so
yeah, it's to be honest, these are very common views by majority of, let's say, at least older people, right? So I don't think his views are that controversial in that sense. I don't agree with them personally, but the idea that this is a gateway drug is a commonly, there are many doctors that I know that still believe that, even though there are many studies that show
yeah.
that it's not necessarily a gateway drug, or it, for example, I think again Joe Rogan had someone on, and Joe Rogan argued that what is a gateway to drugs and to probably addictive behavior is trauma. It's problems, is that type of thing. Anyway, but yeah,
So
I
you
think
don't
that
find it that surprising? I mean, because these other older people that you talk about, I feel like there's, and actually, I'm glad there's this kind of nuance in the way that he thinks and the show. But there's kind of a consistency with everything being aligned to right wing ideologies and right wing talking points and point of views. But he doesn't necessarily fall there. He doesn't, perhaps, I don't know, when it comes to like boosting the economy or raising the minimum wage. I'm pretty sure he would favor that, which are in a way not Republican point of views. But
yeah,
here
but
here he's
you have
so strong. He's you know
look you have to look at him as a part of wider conservative movement. Conservative movement was never necessarily, neoliberals were not necessarily uh, pro-conservative, so to speak. And if you look at, for example, in the UK, conservatives, you have these different types of conservative, for example, called compassionate conservatives or one nation conservatives. People, kind of, Boris Johnson at least claims to come from that tradition, that they are very much pro-government spending, pro-state, pro-nationalistic, right? But and they are not neoliberal. They are very suspicious of international institutions. They are suspicious of international businesses like Amazon. And I'm sure you've noticed Saagar is very anti-Amazon. He's very, very, very anti-China, to be honest, in my view. And the Hill, in as a whole, if you follow that channel and you see their other videos, not the videos of their show, is largely a very right wing like pro channel, and it's funded by a right wing, I believe, billionaire or something. So, and very, very much anti China, in my view. And that's the weakest point of that channel. Whenever they cover China, they cover it with, in my view, with malice. They cover it like with Russiagate. They are very good, but
hmm
now this new story that I'm hesitant to cover because I'm not sure about the data. The Chinese concentration camps, uh, they've been very much at the forefront of that, and oh, China is committing human rights crimes and all that. So it's not a very clear cut thing, and he comes from a more of a nationalistic, statist sort of
yeah. So
conservatism.
exactly. So he's not so against a big state, big government, which is typically very left wing position.
Yeah, yeah, again, yeah, no, he doesn't come from a neoliberal internationalist camp.
Yeah.
That's crucial, I guess, to his. But about Veed, I'm not. To be honest, I haven't read his own work to know that his opposition to that is because on moral grounds, on
Yeah.
medical
So
grounds.
that's okay. So I tried to find out why, right? I did did a little bit of digging. Half of it was just to come and ask you because I know you know a lot more about these kind of political ideologies, so you could clarify some of it. But I also tried to look into it. For instance, he has his own podcast, but I did not listen to his podcast. I just did some Google, and in fact, on Rising on the show, they bring a anti-pot activist, and there's a debate. And I appreciate this from Sagar. He didn't really take part too much in the debate, so I don't know if it's because he thought this person represented all of his point of views, or he didn't want to make it seem like they're double teaming on Crystal, because it was kind of Crystal arguing with the guest, the anti-pot activist. So I think it would have come off very bad if like he was also at the same time. It would have been 2 against 1. So I don't know why he did. He barely says anything really. He says a few things, like a 10-minute video. We'll link it below. He says a few things. He kind of ends it with a joke, and he even does a little bit of like not really devil's advocate. He just says the left says this, or for instance, what do you think? So he doesn't take part in this debate, unfortunately. So I don't really get his point of view from it. But I just wanted to highlight 3 of the arguments. So now we're moving on from him a bit, but just three arguments that this guest made. One of them is okay, but the 2 other one I found him to be ridiculous. So his first argument, and he said that this is like the main one, so he's talking about legalization. He says pro-legalization equals being pro-big tobacco, being pro-big corporations, being pro-big pharmaceuticals, being pro all these giant corporations, right? Because being pro-billionaire. And that is because they're the ones who are, best positioned right now to, once marijuana is legalized in the states, in a particular state, or federally, if it ever happens, they're the best ones positioned to sell and take advantage of it. But I mean, I find this to be a ridiculous argument. This has nothing to do with weed. This is a systematic issue. Sorry.
And no, yeah, you're completely right. Big tobacco.
You can say this about everything.
No. I mean, this is an idiotic argument.
Yeah. And he comes back to it. I swear I'm not cherry picking. He comes back to this a few times, and Crystal says that's a capitalism issue.
First of all, big tobacco and big alcohol are the biggest groups that have lobbied, are some of the biggest groups that have lobbied against marijuana legalization, because it cuts their market share.
Historically, secondly, I think now they've given up on that a bit.
Yeah. Secondly, there was a referendum in one of the states, one of the cities in the US, where they literally, what they were trying to do was to ban local or like, you can't grow weed in your own house for use, but okay, big tobacco can do it. And that was actually rejected by the people in that city or in that state, legalization of marijuana, because it was done in a way to promote monopolies and promote big corporation interests. So I think that's an idiotic argument. It depends how.
Exactly. I mean, because this argument, you can say it about every single product out there in the world, So yeah, it's a legislation problem, it's a governance problem, it's a capitalism problem. So, and like I said, I wasn't cherry picking. He comes back to this multiple times. The second argument, this is a funny one, and I feel like this goes against what he's trying to say. He says, I'm sure you've heard this, today's marijuana is so strong, it's not the same thing as the 1960s or blah, blah, blah. So I've heard this one before. So it's like, it's too strong. So, and then they say that, it's really become this strong because, now that it's being made more professionally, they can make it better. To me, this sounds like a beautiful argument for regulating it. So if there are studies and all this that point out that, hey, we're just increasing the dosage of the THC and now the health problems might become more and more serious, then okay, very well. So I think we should regulate and educate about this. And I don't even know if who knows if this is true, but that's a new thing. You haven't heard this?
No, I have heard this completely idiotic argument. First of all, there are no substantial studies that prove that marijuana has become stronger or anything like that.
Oh, they say like super strong. It's not like they,
Yeah. Or even in comparison to something legal. For example, look at the variety of alcohols that are produced now. And that everything. And secondly, there are historians, many people have argued that in fact, when you make something illegal, for example, many people argue the development of the crack is because cocaine became illegal. It wasn't originally. It became illegal. It became super expensive. So those conditions forced people, creates the market for a cheap, low quality product like crack, right? That's my point of view. Maybe again, if there are studies that disprove that, I hope somebody shares it with us.
Yeah. So again, another ridiculous argument, just put aside. And then the third one, there's some truth to it. So it's pointing out so it talks about health problems. Okay. So it's saying like marijuana could lead to this and that health problem, and there are some studies there. But the hilarious thing is that marijuana, on the other hand, there's plenty of evidence where in a lot of situations it helps people who have certain issues. And then again, there too, it's pushed too far. Sometimes it's like you smoke weed and you heal cancer and
Cancer,
everything goes away.
pull out your
Yeah.
karma.
So everything. But the new one that they've added is schizophrenia. Have you heard about this? So on Joe Rogan's podcast, there was a debate where the person who was anti-pot, that was the only thing that stuck to my head because that was new. That I hadn't heard it. It was a debate from earlier this year, and this guy brought it too. And they're saying that research shows now that weed leads to schizophrenia in some people. And then they're like, yeah, but some people, of course, we're not saying everyone and stuff. And maybe that is again something else that we need to be aware of. But I actually went and looked at the studies a little bit, and there were just 2 or 3 articles that came up. They were the first ones that came up on Google, and they pointed out a few things that these studies that have actually taken place, they've been done on children. So they're like, not children, adolescents. So they say that when adolescents smoke a lot, which if you legalize, technically adolescents shouldn't be allowed to get their hands on marijuana or weed, at least legally. They say that it's because there were children and stuff, and the brain is not developed yet. Or adolescents, sorry, not children, adolescents.
Their brain is still developing.
Yeah.
They're
And the
still growing.
second thing that these scientific studies shows is that schizophrenia very much has to do, not very much, and I don't really know much about this, but it's genetic as well. So people who have people in their family who are schizophrenic, or they have the particular genetic vulnerability, that's what it was written. The studies have shown that in those cases, it can lead to schizophrenia, which, I mean, most people will admit that for a lot of people. And then again, no, everybody, please don't go smoke weed if you don't want to, if you don't like it. But a lot of people do get paranoid, which is, so I can see how, if you have some kind of mental issues, but there's schizophrenia, the paranoia that
No,
people
no,
get, it lasts a few hours and then it's gone, and
but
they don't like it. So I just wanted to say that on the health, maybe there are some areas, and the funny thing is that it's studied so little that they come up with bullshit ones half the time. But the schizophrenia one is a new one, and I just wanted to look a little bit into it, and those were 2 nuances that this gentleman didn't mention whatsoever.
yeah, to be honest, my problem is exactly like more to do with the fact that if it was legal, there would be far more research, and then we would know far more about it. And then, as adults, we would be able to make uh, consensual decisions. Alcohol is made up of sugar, and sugar is the probably currently the most dangerous drugs that we interact with. Because of, I mean, there was a time we tried this because there was so much alcoholism and stuff. They tried prohibition, didn't really work. uh, and I think it's the same with that. I'm sure there are
Yeah.
negative health consequences. I'm sure each different person has a different relationship with each drug, but I believe human beings should be treated like adults in their personal life. I you know, it's quite funny how we talk about freedom, and then yeah, I believe in these basic freedoms, not a lot of other
Yeah.
freedoms people seek. But yeah, that's the
These
biggest
freedoms that literally have to do with you, unlike, not wearing a mask, which you endanger others, or like, or burning something, which you endanger others. Yeah,
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 but
yeah, yeah. Or I don't know, drunk driving,
yeah,
or I don't think people who are on drugs should be able to
yeah,
uh, operate vehicles,
yeah,
of course, but that I believe should be enforced by police, not by putting a blanket ban
yeah,
on drugs or
yeah.
whatever.
But yeah, just ridiculous arguments. And I mean, the first one, though, I just love it. If you're pro legalization, you're pro big tobacco, other giant corporations, billionaires. That's a capitalism problem. They should have maybe had a debate about capitalism and regulation and governance.